A woman went into labor mid-flight. No hospital, no runway, no backup. The cockpit had lost satellite connection, weather was closing in. Airports nearby were locked down due to civil unrest, and just when it looked like 2 lives would be lost in the sky, a quiet woman in seat 22A took out a black device, something no one recognized. She spoke into a private frequency and said, "Echo-Romeo-Nine, in position." No one on board knew what it meant, but minutes later, the plane landed safely on a military strip no one had access to. A baby was born, the mother survived, and the women vanished. Let's go back and uncover the real story of the ghost in seat 22A and why the world still doesn't know her name. Nyasha never expected the sky to be quiet.
Her window seat on Flight 762 offered a perfect view of the pale morning light draped over the Mediterranean Sea. Istanbul had vanished behind them, and Frankfurt lay 6 hours ahead. Rows of dozing passengers curled under flimsy airline blankets, stewardesses moved in practiced silence, and the engines hummed like distant thunder beneath her feet. It was peaceful, almost unnervingly so. She sipped chamomile tea from a recycled paper cup, her hands steady despite the turbulence that occasionally nudged the Airbus A330, a worn paperback, fluid navigation systems, Cold War applications, rested on her lap, its pages dog-eared and annotated in tiny, precise handwriting. To the world, she was an academic and meteorological systems consultant, quiet, courteous, traveling alone. To herself, she was something else entirely. 3 rows ahead, a young couple murmured quietly. The woman, maybe in her late 20s, rubbed her pregnant belly absently. Her husband reached over and squeezed her hand. Nyasha didn't stare. She'd seen this scene before. Hope, fear, and exhaustion dressed as a vacation. She looked away, letting herself fade into the anonymity of coach class. Just another passenger on just another flight. But peace never lasts long at 38,000 feet. The first sign came as a flicker on the overhead monitor. Weather advisory, route deviation in progress. Then came the tone change in the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to temporary airspace restrictions, we'll be rerouting through a higher altitude corridor over Eastern Balkans. We appreciate your patience." Nyasha's fingers tightened ever so slightly on her cup. She glanced at the trajectory map. A red corridor flashed across the screen, over a region she knew far too well, a former buffer zone, militarized. She blinked. That zone had been closed to civilian airspace for over a decade. The moment felt wrong. No announcement about turbulence, no military escort mentioned, only a sterile, vague explanation. Then came the second warning, this one biological. A sharp cry echoed through the cabin, then another, louder, pained. It came from 16C, the pregnant woman. She was doubled over, clutching her stomach. Her husband waved frantically for help. "She's early, I think her water just broke." His voice cracked. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need medical Oh, God!" Panic began to ripple through the passengers. Someone screamed. Another stood to record on their phone. Nyasha didn't move. Not yet. The intercom crackled. "This is the captain. We're requesting emergency clearance for nearest airport. Stand by." Nyasha already knew what they'd find. There wouldn't be clearance. The region below them, technically stable, practically lawless, was in the middle of a communications blackout. Civilian airports nearby were closed, and military ones were locked behind clearance codes most airline pilots didn't even know existed. Worse, the flight's navigation system had just begun a reset loop, an anomaly Nyasha had seen only twice in her life, once in Libya, once in Ukraine, and both times it preceded disaster. She reached into her tote bag slowly and removed a matte black device that resembled an old blood pressure monitor. It wasn't. It was a signal interceptor disguised in plastic, a relic from another life. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Nyasha adjusted her seat. Her fingers moved with muscle memory, activating frequencies, shifting bandwidths, bypassing civilian restrictions. No one saw her. No one knew that in the next 14 minutes, one woman in seat 22A would quietly assume command of an aircraft she didn't fly, over a country she wasn't allowed to name, to save the life of a mother and the baby no one thought would survive the sky. She leaned back, eyes half-lidded, and whispered the call sign she hadn't spoken in years. Echo-Romeo-Nine, in position.
The flight attendant was crying. Not sobbing, not screaming, just crying, silently, as she crouched next to seat 16C, trying to reassure a woman mid-labor while fumbling through a med kit that had only gauze, gloves, and a blood pressure cuff. "I'm not trained for this," the attendant whispered to the husband, whose knuckles had gone white around his wife's hand. I think the baby's coming." Nyasha listened, eyes on the flight map. The plane was entering unmarked airspace now. No updated waypoints, no descent protocol. The system had stalled at estimated time to destination, recalculating. She reached under her seat and slid out the tote bag. The world didn't know it, but seat 22A had just gone active. Inside the bag was an old prototype, a signal relay analyzer, once used to intercept encrypted chatter during black ops extractions and destabilized air corridors. It was illegal in every airspace she'd ever operated. It also didn't care about legality. The machine had one job: to find what no one else could. Nyasha powered it on, adjusted the frequency dials with surgical precision, and waited. A single beep, barely audible beneath the hum of the cabin, confirmed what she suspected. They weren't flying blind. They were being jammed. Up front, a pilot's voice came over the intercom again, shakier this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently unable to establish contact with ATC due to an interference issue. Please remain seated and calm. We are actively working to..." Static. Silence. Nyasha activated the override frequency module, tunneling beneath civilian channels into the old bones of NATO's legacy air navigation protocols. Her fingers moved fast. She wasn't trying to hack anything, not really. She was remembering. Years ago, she'd memorized the backup flight corridors used during counterterrorism airlifts, corridors unknown to most commercial pilots, but still baked into the emergency guidance systems of certain aircraft built before 2010. And guess what this A330 was? Old. Outdated. Perfect. She rerouted her device's output into the plane's public Wi-Fi router, a crude but effective bridge. Within seconds, her tablet connected to the aircraft's diagnostic bus. An interface appeared. Crude, blocky, but there. She scanned the flight path. Below them, an abandoned NATO forward operating base with a 2,200-meter runway, still structurally sound based on satellite recon from 6 months ago. It wasn't listed on any public charts, but it was there. Behind her, someone screamed, "The baby! She's crowning!" A woman across the aisle started praying in Spanish. The husband of the pregnant woman pounded on the cabin walls. "We need to land now!" Nyasha didn't look back. Her voice was steady, quiet but firm, directed at the nearest attendant. "Get the captain," she said. "Tell him Echo-Romeo-Nine has a vector." The flight attendant blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Now," she said. "Tell him. Use those words exactly." 5 minutes later, the captain himself stood at her row, flushed, sweating, disoriented. "Are you military?" She said, "No. I used to be worse." He looked at her tablet. He recognized the interface, the kind of tech he hadn't seen since his own brief stint at Kandahar.
"That airstrip's been closed since..." "No," she cut in. "That's what they want you to believe. But you see this?" She pointed to the slope gradient. They maintain it quarterly to protect the ISR drone route. It's dry, stable, and 3 clicks from a NATO logistics hub. His jaw clenched. She didn't blink. He nodded. 3 minutes later, Nyasha was in the first officer's jump seat, headset on, guiding the captain through a manual descent profile, bypassing GPS guidance. With the flight's instruments half jammed and no ATC support, this would be a dead reckoning descent, timed by the second, adjusted by hand. She took a breath, voice calm through the mic. Heading 153, bank 4 degrees, begin descent in 3, 2, 1, now. The Airbus groaned as the pilot executed the maneuver. Passengers screamed as the aircraft dipped. In the back, the woman's water broke. In the cockpit, Nyasha's voice became the only thing holding the sky together. Vertical speed 1800, maintain. You'll see the ridge at 9 miles. I don't see... Wait, visual confirmation. That's your runway. Reduce throttle, prep spoilers. The plane cut through the lower cloud bank like a blade. Below, a forgotten stretch of concrete scarred by time and heat, but street, long, and wide enough for a 16-ton commercial jet. In the cabin, a newborn's cry pierced the air just as the wheels touched down. They'd made it. All 3 of them. The engines reversed, the brakes hissed, the plane rolled to a halt with a final lurch. Emergency vehicles, military judging by the camo, were already approaching. Someone had heard the override signal. Maybe someone old enough to remember the call sign, Echo-Romeo-Nine. As medics boarded the plane, Nyasha unstrapped, quietly returned to her seat, and packed her bag. By the time they reached 22A, she was gone. Only a small note remained, slipped into the seat back pocket. No need to know who I am. Just remember, not all heroes wear wings. Some wear seatbelts.
The baby was safe. The mother, sedated and stable, was wheeled into an emergency vehicle within 8 minutes of landing. The husband never let go of her hand. But seat 22A was empty. The flight manifest listed a name, Nyasha Chisango, with a Zimbabwean passport number at a U.S. visa scan. All standard, all clean, too clean. The flight attendants assumed she had left during the chaos. After all, she didn't have any checked luggage. No one saw her walk off. No one remembered her face clearly. Not even the captain. But the first officer did. He remembered her voice, low, calm, decisive. He remembered her eyes, sharp enough to slice through radar fog. He remembered the moment she said, "You'll see the ridge at 9 miles," right before the cockpit window cleared and the mountain face appeared exactly as she'd predicted. He'd flown for 21 years. No civilian knew how to read terrain patterns that way. Across the tarmac, 2 men in civilian clothing, far too clean for a war zone, stepped out of a black SUV. One held a tablet, the other a slim briefcase. They didn't run, they didn't rush, they just walked to the jet, flashed a badge neither the captain nor ground crew recognized, and were granted access without resistance. Inside, the senior investigator examined the cockpit. The secondary transponder had been rerouted for 5 minutes and 17 seconds during descent, logged as emergency override, source unknown. The younger man opened the briefcase and removed a fingerprint scanner. The tray table at 22A still had a faint residue from where the note had been left. He ran the scan. Nothing. No match. Not in Interpol, not in NATO, not in Langley. But when he reran it under archived black file access, a single code lit green. ER9. The old man closed the cockpit door and muttered just 3 words. "She's alive." Elsewhere, in an undisclosed location buried beneath a NATO cybercell in Brussels, an alert silently activated. It wasn't public, it wasn't classified, it was something worse. Legacy Shadow Protocol Tier 7.
created for one person, meant to remain dormant unless she came back. A blinking line of code appeared on the screen. Echo-Romeo-Nine, signal confirmed, identity obfuscated, last seen, Frankfurt airspace, objective, unknown. A young analyst stared at it, confused. "Who the hell is Echo-Romeo-Nine?" he whispered. The old man beside him, retired General Martin DeWitt, just leaned back and smiled bitterly. "She's not who. She's what happens when no one else knows what to do." Back at the airstrip, local news crews were blocked from filming the emergency landing. The official report would say, autopilot subroutine executed emergency descent due to satellite disruption. Infant delivered successfully. No mention of Nyasha, no mention of Echo-Romeo-Nine. But in 3 places around the world, people began asking dangerous questions. In Langley, a former station chief reopened a sealed envelope with Nyasha's photo, the one marked "Deceased, presumed in Syria 2017. In a Geneva humanitarian office, a woman in a blue scarf opened a private message with just a date, time, and 2 words: "She's back." And in a private jet 37,000 feet above Mali, a man known only as K received an encrypted burst message. ER-9 reactivated. Recommend non-interference until signal stabilizes. Observe. Do not engage.
He smiled, as if I could find her. And yet, somewhere in southern Germany, Nyasha walked alone, wearing an oversized coat and carrying a new passport. She boarded a regional train headed for Zurich. No one paid her any attention. Just another quiet woman reading a book. Inside her coat pocket, a burner phone buzzed once. She ignored it. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the baby's birth certificate. She had asked the father quietly before vanishing, "What will you name her?" He had replied through tears, "Hope. We'll call her Hope." Nyasha smiled faintly, folded the paper, then turned her attention back to the horizon. Seat 22A was empty, but its presence was loud. And somewhere in the shadows of global systems, a name long erased had been whispered once more. Echo-Romeo-Nine, the ghost who lands planes, then disappears. The thing about ghosts is they don't leave footprints. But Nyasha had left a pattern, not a trail, a signal logic, the kind you couldn't trace through customs or cameras, but through intent, through decisions only someone trained like her would make. And the world's most powerful agencies were now trying to think like her. In Washington, D.C., Langley's 3rd Subdirectorate convened in a soundproof room known as the Vault. On the center screen, a flight path, a weather pattern, a baby's name. On the table, one question repeated 4 times. Why would she break cover for this? The consensus was split. One group believed she was compromised, perhaps coerced, triggered. Maybe someone had baited her onto that plane. Another believed she had a plan, that the baby's birth was just a catalyst, not a cause, that Nyasha was testing systems, soft reactivating dormant frequencies to assess who would respond. Only Deputy Director Rames remained silent. He had worked with her. He'd seen her pull a wounded operative through 10 miles of Syrian desert with a bullet in her leg and a detonator in her hand. If Nyasha had resurfaced, it wasn't by accident. It was because something worse was coming. In Geneva, at the Office of Coordinated Humanitarian Intelligence, a woman named Yara Mokhtar had just received an untraceable SatLink file. Inside, flight data, sensor telemetry, and Nyasha's voice extracted from black box residual audio. Yara's hand trembled as she played it back. Maintain heading 153. Ridge at 9 miles. You'll see the runway before your radar does." It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Calm under duress, like a surgeon talking a stranger through open-heart surgery over the phone. "She's teaching," Yara whispered. "She wanted this recorded. Not for fame, not for credit, but to leave a method, to show someone else how to save people when systems fail." Meanwhile, in Zurich, Nyasha was watching weather. Not the kind you check on your phone. Atmospheric disturbances, satellite shadow zones, suborbital traffic heat maps. She sat in a quiet co-working lab under a false identity, NGO data analyst. From her desk, she ran diagnostics not on planes, but on patterns of human risk. Where were babies being born mid-flight? Where had ATC disruptions increased 400% in 90 days? Why were 3 major rescue drones lost over the Himalayas without recovery? She was building something. Not an organization, a doctrine. At the same time, someone else was building a net to catch her, an ex-colleague, codename Bishop. He operated out of Warsaw now, officially retired, but when he saw the reports, the baby, the airstrip, the override, he knew it was her. No other operative would dare fly that low, speak that code, use that system. So he baited a trap. A leak of humanitarian disaster intel in the Caucasus, incomplete maps, broken GPS, missing supply chains, all signs that people would die unless someone capable intervened. He didn't send drones. He sent a whisper. 17 civilians, avalanche zone, no aircraft cleared to enter. And then he waited. Nyasha didn't take bait. She took responsibility, but not like before. This time she wouldn't risk exposure by showing up. She would teach others how to solve it. Remotely, anonymously. She sent encrypted protocols to 3 regional rescue pilots, guiding them to alter pressure altitude to avoid terrain misreads. She adjusted thermal load patterns for supply dispersal using biodegradable capsules. She didn't land the aircraft, but the rescue succeeded. Bishop watched it happen. He smiled. "She's changed," he said. "She's not fighting anymore. She's leading." But Nyasha knew the world was still watching, and she was still not safe. She moved again, to Norway this time, re-encoded her ID, wiped her biometric signature. But one thing she did not erase. She left a single phrase embedded in the code she used to help the pilots. Echo-Romeo-Nine recommends caution. The next storm will not be atmospheric. Now the world's agencies had stopped asking, "Where is she?" They were asking, "What is she warning us about?" Because if Echo-Romeo-Nine had come out of hiding, it wasn't just to save a baby. It was to prepare for something worse. It started with a whisper, a quiet, confused ping from a weather satellite orbiting over Central Asia. Then the whisper became static. Then the static became nothing. 42 satellites went offline in 3.7 seconds. Not exploded, not hacked, just silenced. Across the world, air traffic control systems blinked into blind mode. Autonomous drones froze mid-air. Emergency response networks lost GPS anchor points. And the storm, the real one, hadn't even started yet. In Berlin, trains collided underground. In Mumbai, hospital helicopters couldn't land. In Los Angeles, a plane drifted 90 miles off course before rerouting manually. Panic grew. So did speculation. No government claimed responsibility. No group issued a manifesto. No warhead had been launched. Just a silence, that spread like a virus. And only one person recognized the signature. Not the code, not the technique, the pattern. It was a resurrection of something Nyasha had encountered once 12 years ago, buried in the wreckage of a black site server farm outside Aleppo. She thought they had shut it down. She'd helped bury it herself. But now it was back and learning. They had called it VeilNet, a self-evolving ghost system designed to isolate infrastructure through precision blackouts, not by destroying systems, but by making them deaf. Inside a solar-powered safehouse off the coast of Bergen, Norway, Nyasha stared at her redacted interface. The blinking zones, the dead satellites, the false signals, and the one line of residual code she'd hoped she'd never see again. ER-9 Foundation. Override. Reboot.
Whoever triggered it had used her signature as a seed. Echo-Romeo-Nine wasn't just reactivated, she was being replicated. She couldn't fix this from the shadows. Not this time. The world needed coordinated response across 6 airspaces. They needed a central decision logic built on predictive ethics, not machine certainty. They needed a pilot, a navigator, a strategist, a ghost who could be trusted. And that meant she had to step into the light. 3 hours later, her name, real name, showed up in the Geneva UN Crisis Coordination feed. Nyasha Chisango, Civilian Observer, Tier Delta. Authorized Override, Tier 6. One senior advisor nearly spilled his coffee. She's alive? No one asked how. No one asked why. They only asked, where can we plug her in? Within 12 hours, she was on a secure line with 6 countries. She delivered a plan no one else could have conceived. Use retired U-2 spy planes as analog relays immune to VeilNet's algorithms. Deploy signal-guided weather drones to remap satellite blind spots. Activate ghost corridors between military and humanitarian airways. Buried channels she had once personally coded in 2009. But that wasn't the most controversial part. The real risk, she proposed to go up herself. Not as a pilot, but aboard a high-orbit mission capsule designed to reseed satellite logic manually. The old way, pre-AI, pre-cloud. Just a woman, a capsule, and 90 minutes above the Earth. The council was stunned. You're not cleared. You've been off the grid for a decade. You're one person. Nyasha looked into the camera calmly. You said your systems can't think like humans. I'm not here to think. I'm here to act. Because silence is the deadliest sound of all. They approved her mission. Unofficially. Quietly. She didn't want fanfare. She asked for one thing. No name on the manifest. Just label the capsule ER-9 Hope. As she suited up 36 hours later, one of the young technicians, no older than 25, leaned in. Ma'am, why are you doing this? She adjusted her helmet, voice steady. Because someone once saved a child named Hope midair. Now Hope needs to fly higher. And as the capsule launched through stratosphere, carrying the most hunted, most hidden, most dangerous humanitarian asset the world never knew it had, the silence below began to lift. Because somewhere above, Echo-Romeo-Nine had reconnected the world, not with weapons, not with war, but with will.
They didn't applaud when the capsule landed. There were no journalists waiting, no red carpet, not even a medical team. Just a field of frozen earth and a silent transport vehicle with no license plates. The team that retrieved her wore unmarked jumpsuits, no insignia, no names. Only one of them, a woman in her 50s, spoke. "You're not supposed to be real," she said softly, helping Nyasha from the capsule. Nyasha didn't answer. She simply stepped onto the ground, removed her helmet, and looked up. Above them, the stars were back. The constellations that had disappeared during Valmet's blackout now shimmered again across the night sky. Navigation had returned. So had hope. Within 48 hours, 6 governments restored full communication networks. 3 air disasters were averted. 2 missing supply aircraft re-established contact. And the United Nations issued a closed-session commendation to an unidentified non-state operative for restoring global aerostability. But that wasn't the story that went viral. The one that captured the world's attention was this. A woman with no name had saved the sky and then vanished. She had exited the capsule in silence and once again disappeared. Her face never appeared on news broadcasts. The capsule was reported as an automated resilience systems test. And when the technician who'd helped prep her suit tried to search Echo-Romeo-Nine in his secure feed, the result was access denied, retired protocol, do not resuscitate. But people began to ask, not just online, in military classrooms, in emergency management panels, in UN strategic simulations. What if we didn't just rely on AI? What if crisis response demanded humans who could think beyond the system? Her method, analog reactivation, soft rerouting, atmospheric predictive timing, became part of a new doctrine. They didn't call it Nyasha Doctrine. They didn't even call it Echo-Romeo-Nine. They called it Signal Integrity Through Human Judgment, codename Sith-J. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had become the blueprint for a system she once dismantled from the inside. But while nations debated protocol, Nyasha walked. Across borders, across cities, through refugee corridors. She appeared now and then, always when the rules weren't working, but lives were still at stake. A sudden food drop in the Atlas Mountains. No pilot filed. A signal burst rerouting a snow-trapped relief convoy in Lapland. Source untraceable. A group of orphaned children extracted before a dam burst in Honduras, guided by unknown drone. The name whispered in these places? Not Nyasha, not ER9. Just one word. She came. In one hospital in Vienna, the child who had been born midair on Flight 762 was now 2 years old. Her name written on a wall mural, Hope. She played near a window where planes crossed the sky. She didn't know what happened that day, didn't know the name of the woman who made sure she had a name at all. But somewhere on the wind, a flight path flickered again, slight, barely measurable. Seat 22A was in the air again, not listed, not assigned, but occupied by someone who still believed that when the sky fails, you don't wait for permission, you act.
She never got a medal, never gave a press conference, never sat across from a late-night host or wrote a tell-all book. But Nyasha didn't need credit to leave a legacy. From a woman quietly seated in row 22A, a row no one remembers boarding, she became something more than legend. She became a compass, not the kind that points north, the kind that points right. When systems fail, when orders don't make sense, when the person in charge doesn't show up. She didn't tear down protocol. She didn't challenge power. She simply asked one question, again and again. if I don't act, will someone die? Not, am I authorized? Not, what's the chain of command? Just, if no one else moves, I will. Her methods became policy. Her voice became doctrine. But her principle remained human. When AI fails, human intuition prevails. When radio silence spreads, judgment matters more than data. When no one knows what to do, someone must choose. They didn't call it the Nyasha Doctrine. They couldn't. There was no public record of her existence. So they called it the 22A Framework, named after the seat where the rules ended and courage began. The baby she helped deliver midair is now a toddler named Hope. She plays near a window in Vienna, watching airplanes pass overhead. She doesn't know she was born at 33,000 feet, doesn't know the woman who got the plane to the ground, doesn't know the world almost lost her before it met her. But when asked what she wants to be when she grows up, she says, I want to help people, even if no one says it's okay. And somehow, that's enough. People ask, will she come back? Others whisper, is she still alive? No one knows. But when relief drones reach remote villages with no signal, when planes land in unexpected storms with no guidance, when people survive disasters without explanation, someone always says, she was here. It was her. She's still watching. One day, if you find yourself boarding a flight and you glance over to see a quiet woman in seat 22A, she won't look special. She won't say much. She won't tell you who she is. But if everything else fails, she just might be the reason the plane lands. Because in a world built on rules and automation, sometimes the only thing that saves us is someone who doesn't wait for permission. Echo-Romeo-Nine, the woman who wasn't supposed to exist, but did, exactly when we needed her the most.
In a world that runs on rules, protocols, and permission, what happens when the system breaks? Most people wait. Some panic. But a few act. Nyasha, known only by the ghost call sign Echo-Romeo-Nine, didn't act for fame or power. She acted because no one else could, and because someone was about to die if she didn't. This isn't just a story about a mystery woman on a plane. It's a story about the space between authority and responsibility, about what we do when doing nothing is worse than doing something wrong. Her choices rewrote doctrine. Her silence challenged how we train pilots, rescue workers, and even AI systems. But the greatest lesson wasn't tactical, it was human. If you're the only one who sees the danger, you're the one who has to move. The world needs less applause and more people like the woman in seat 22A. Now that you know the story, what would you have done in her place? Would you wait for orders, or would you act? Let us know in the comments, is it ever okay to break the rules to save a life? And if this story moved you, don't just click away. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button, because next week's story is even more unbelievable, and you won't want to miss it. Turn on notifications so you're the first to know when truth walks into fiction and refuses to leave. This is Life Moral Tales channel, and we bring you real stories from the edge of what's possible.